In this video, we're going to do some test-driven development that interacts with the database, and we're going to do it through the CLI. So we've started out here. I need to import legacy passwords, and I need to hash them with the new system. So what we'll do is we've got a couple tools that we're going to use. The first thing I'll need is I need some samples of the originals that we're going to get. And it looks like my database connection has gone away. Let's go and get, we're going to get a dump from production. And, well, no, we don't want to touch production yet. Never touch production until you're absolutely certain that it's going to work and you've got stuff that passes unit tests. So anyway, we've got a dump from production that's on our staging box. And we're going to be getting these user accounts. They have password hashes that are the old style hashes. And if you'll remember, we have to bring this old style hash to the new style hash and insert it into the database. So what I'll need is a few sample entries here, and then we've got to work with it to make sure that it's the known version. Now I've got one sample that we did, which is password, so we need to make sure that we include that in the test. But the first thing we'll do is we're going to get the database into a state that is useful for us. As always, we're going to start out by writing the test. So let's define what we need to do by writing the specifications as a test case. So public function test import. We'll talk about doing a single user account because really when we're doing this, we're doing a single import 1800 times. So test import user password. And what we'll need to do is we need to test and verify that the starting condition of the database does not have a password. Then the end condition of the database has the password having been imported and is using the current one. And in cases like this where you kind of have to think about it, it's easier to define what you're doing in comments. Then you can always go back and remove those comments. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say 1, verify the target database does not have a current hash. And it's probably going to be starting out as null because in reality that's actually what we've got going on when we look at this new database that we're working with. I click on users, the user's password is null, so we want to make sure that it starts with null. So that's number 1. Number 2, get verify that we can authenticate using the password chain. We already built that password chain. Now we'll have one of these later where when someone authenticates and we do verify with the password chain, since we'll have access to the password at that time, we'll just remove that, we'll just redo it. We'll rehash the password and then save it and then upgrade the password version so that we don't have to use the authentication chain anymore. So now that we've done those things in this test, we can start by working with the database itself. Now, when we're dealing with the database, there's a trait that we use, and we're going to use, I have to look it up, but there's a trait that we use that helps us connect to the database. Now, taking a look at the PHPUnit documentation, this is the trait that we're going to use. We need to use test case trait, and that allows us to connect to the database. And there's some other things that we'll need to do in order to make that work. There we go. And that's pulling it out of, that needs to be pulling it out of dbUnit. Let's make sure we've got dbUnit installed. We should. It should be in tools. And as you can see, the tools directory is missing. So let's check the development server and see if it's there. I do have tools. Is there anything in there? There's nothing in there. So that means that we need to download and install dbUnit. Now I use the var package so that I can put it in tools, and that's also what we have defined in PHPUnit XML. So I need to make sure that this directory exists. I'll go ahead and create this directory now. mkdir. I'll jump into that directory, and then we need to download the var from the current documentation. And so that is this guy right here. We can use wget to go ahead and download it. So we'll put that in there. All done. Everything is all well and good. So now let's go ahead and jump into PHP Storm and do a deployment, sync from D202, and there we go. Now it sees it. And assume that it knows what it's doing. We'll do that, and that doesn't take but a second to download. Now let's check. We got tools, PHPUnit, and dbUnit var, so they're all there. Now we do need to make sure that we've got this included in our PHP tools language fun stuff, so let's make sure that that shows up. We're going to go to PHP language, PHP runtime, include path. Let's go ahead and add it. We're going to do add this, and tools, dbUnit, apply, OK. All better now. And as I go up here and use test case trait, you can see it now shows up as PHPUnit dbUnit. So that's how we do that. Let's make that a use test case trait. There we go. Now it's working. So the next thing that we need to look at is our PHPUnit XML file, because there's a way that we can define access to the database. And again, we're going to reference the documentation. Up here we can see that PHPUnit does have this var name dbdsn and a value, password, and a db name. So we're going to grab this and put it into our test case and just basically copy paste the stuff that's out of here, because this is how you're supposed to set up a database connection. So inside the PHP settings, which should be, let's see, that's all PHPUnit. So all we're going to do is copy paste this as is, and then we'll change it. I like to put it above all the test cases or at the bottom. Actually, the bottom is usually the place that I'll put it, just because it's easier to find that way. We'll hit save. So we've got our DB name that we've got to deal with. So DB name equals IMC2. Host is localhost, that's fine. Then we have our user and our password. Now that information is going to be in our config DB, so we can just copy it straight out of here. So now what this does is it sets up some globals that we can use inside of our testing. And you'll see how we take advantage of that down here by implementing the items that we need to make the trait work, which is a final public function, get connection, and also this static private PDO. So all we got to do is just copy paste this stuff straight out of here. It's always better to take things out of the documentation that you know work than it is to try and reinvent your own wheel. So we'll come down here, and that works. And then anytime we need to get to this database connection, we're going to reference self PDO. Now it's time to put the database in a known state. So the way that we do that is we first decide what table we're going to work with, and in this case we're working with the users table. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here. There's way more accounts than we need to run tests. So let's take a look at the foreign keys to see which tables we need to keep, and the rest of them we can truncate and set to 0. The reason we truncate it is that means that each time we run the test will run faster. Instead of loading a 15 gig file with tens of thousands of rows, it's running a tiny file with like 20 rows. So we'll do that. We need to keep accounts, phones, and user roles. And so we'll start with that. Now also I want to make note, one thing I've already done, which is not included in the video, is I've created this legacy users table. And all this legacy users table is I've created it using a query where it's just create table, legacy users table. And then in here I put a select statement. So select asterisk from imc.users, limit 3, order by users ID, limit 3. And all that did was insert this one, and this one. And then at the bottom, I've added this known good at example.org with this hash, and that comes from this legacy hasher test. So that way we know that passwords should give us this expected hash. And so now I got 3 different account types and a known good one, and I'm going to take advantage of that because I need to be able to copy these over, this user's password, into the destination user's area. But again, I've only got the 3 here, so I need to delete everything in here that is for a user account that's greater than 3, and then probably copy over the information for that known good account. But let's start by removing everything that we don't need, which is everything but accounts, phones, and user roles. The easiest way to do that, I find, is to use this and just simply go like this. That gives us all of our table names. and bring that over into Sublime Text. And then I can do find and replace for comma space, put everything on a new line. And then I'll remove all of the tables that are here that I want to keep, so that I'm left with something that looks like this. And so these are the ones that I want to truncate. I want them set to 0 because they have no business being in my test. And I turn foreign key checks off so I can truncate all those, then we turn them back on. So we'll go ahead and run this. And after we run that, we need to double check and make sure that we've got data in accounts, for example, and we do. We need to double check and make sure we've got data in phones, and we do. We need to double check and make sure we've still got the users table, and we do. And of course we need the user roles, and so those are all intact. So now let's get rid of the data that we don't need, and that would be all users with an ID greater than 3. So delete from users where users ID is greater than 3. So that's all those. And then I need to remove accounts that our current users are not using. So let's see what the users are using. So I need accounts 3, 4, and 1. So if you're not 3, 4, and 1, then you need to be deleted. So let's take a look at accounts. So we're going to do delete from IMC accounts where accounts ID not in 3, 4, and 1. So that'll delete all the accounts that we don't need. Double check, make sure our users are still there. See, if you did it wrong, you deleted that account, it would cascade and kill these. So, and then we do users phone, everything greater than 3, and user role, everything greater than 3. So let's go phones, delete from phones where phones ID is greater than 3. Done. And user roles, there's only 2 of them, so we can just do it this way. Delete, apply, finish. And then lastly, something that we just did there on those roles killed our users. So that was definitely a mistake that we made there. So we're going to need to restore from a backup and fix that problem. This is a very good example of always check your destination data to make sure that you didn't screw up and kill something that you meant to keep. And so we'll do that. Let's go ahead and restore, and then I'm going to repeat my actions here all the way up to dealing with the roles. Okay, so I found out that I did this actually out of order. If we take a look at accounts, which we need, then accounts shows us that we've got foreign keys, so I got to hold on to it, address and phones. So let's remove address from there. Now, for each one of these that we work on, we got to check and see if it's got foreign keys. So we can get rid of that one. Let's see what else we got here. Accounts table. Let's close these guys out as we continue to move through this. So users, references, accounts, phones, and addresses. So now we should be able to truncate these guys, and it should be all right. Address space, artwork. I think it'll be fine. So let's go ahead and truncate those now. Then we'll take a look, make sure users is still there. It is indeed still there. So now what we ought to do is delete everything on the account level that is not accounts 3, 4, and 1. So let's delete from accounts where accounts ID not in 3, 4, and 1. So let's go ahead and delete that one. Now that should have removed a lot of phones. It should have removed a lot of addresses. It should have removed a lot of things. So let's do address ID. Yeah, that's fine. Let's take a look at, let's make sure users is still there. Users is indeed is still there. Now the account ID here, we got a lot of them there. We really do. So let's go ahead and delete everything from users greater than 3. We're going to start adding these here so that we can debug this, because this is really kind of tricky when you're working with data that's coming from a production side. So let's do, let's just say make known state. I'm just going to call it this for now. And this is turning out to be rather tricky, actually. So, because when I do this, it's deleting users without me knowing it, which means I'm deleting accounts or foreign keys or something. So let's make sure account ID 3, 4, and 1 still exists in accounts. That's good. Boom, that's there. Okay, great. Now, accounts phone 6, 7, 8, 7, those need to stay. So let's do phones. Let's look at phones. So let's select asterisk from IC phones. Let's do delete phones where phones ID not in. And we need to get some IDs that are important. So 6, 7, 8, 7. 6, 7, 8, 7. Right, that's important. And then on the user's side, we need 1, 2, and 3. And that should be everything that we need to keep. So let's run that and see if we still have users in our system. We do. Okay, great. So now we're going to do the same thing for addresses, because I think addresses has lots of stuff in it. So accounts has addresses 5 and 7, 8, 1, 7, 8, 6. So let's delete. Let's see. Delete from where address ID not in. And the account addresses is 5 and 1, 7, 8, 6. And then let's look at our users. Do they have addresses? They do not. So that should be okay. We'll go ahead and try this now and see after we delete that, do we still have users? And we do. So now we've got phones. We're going to leave the roles as is because it's just a couple of roles and our password version is there. So we were accidentally deleting foreign keys, and we have on delete cascade enabled, so it was killing some of our tables that we didn't actually mean to kill. Now let's take a look at our legacy users table. You can see 4 knowngoodexample.org. We're just going to copy this one row. We'll just copy this one field actually, and we're going to insert that here. Now I need to give it an account ID, so we'll put it as 1. It needs a phone number as 1. It needs a role, a 3, and a password version, which is 1. So we'll do that. That will help us get the database in the known state that we need it to be in. And I have saved all of my work here so that if I ever restored this, I could just run this script again and then get what I needed. So now we can jump over to doing smart dump, and let's do smart dump, and we need our syntax here. Now smart dump, in case I haven't done this already in the video because I got sidetracked dealing with that problem. Smart dump requires that you do a -- config in order to set up database.json, which you can see that is already set up, and that just contains our usernames, password, etc. So if you run smart dump and it doesn't work, it will tell you you need to set up the config. The next thing that you do is you run smart dump discover, and that will test the connection, and it will show you what tables it's going to export and in what order. And of course, once you do that, you can just do smart dump and put it in a place that makes sense. We've got up here has already been set up because I've already done this once. I always put the test data underneath the unit test directory, right? This is where we have all our tests. So then I put the test data here, and I always name them the name of the test.xml. So I come up here, I can grab this, copy, oops, and we're going to do this just like this. And so we're going to dump that into tests, unit, test data, put this here, .xml. And as soon as I run that, it's going to dump everything there, and it's going to show us It gives us our size, so it's 9.49K. That's tiny, that's good. We want these as small as possible. It saved the XML file that we're going to use in our test here, but it also saved a copy of the database in this current state as a SQL file, so that later on if we need to make a change to this, we can just restore that SQL file and it puts the database exactly back in the way that it is now. That's useful for later. Make sure that you always keep those intact. And that's why it's very important for you to name these after the test, because then you can see what they are. So here we've only got 2, 5, 9, 13, 23 rows of data so that we can run our tests. That puts it in a known state. Now, I've got this test over here that we need to write. And we need to make sure that this is working. So you can see I broke off at create my XML data set, and really what we're going to do now is we're going to say test, put it all there, and that's there. Now I need to write a test that will connect to this and show me that my connection is correct, so that I can go ahead and start actually writing this test import user password thing. And we'll do that by adding this test. So this is just a simple test data ready. All I'm doing is selecting account from users, and then I'm going to prepare PDO. When you prepare PDO, you're using self PDO because that's what we've defined up here. So anytime in this test, you're always going to use this self PDO, which is a static variable. Then we prepare the SQL statement, then we run and execute. The next thing we do, which you need to get in the habit of this, is assert same. We should be able to run that and not get an error code. So the default, like I ran this and everything is happy, is 5 zeros. So make sure you start including this in your tests. You want to make sure that you're executing things well. Then from there, we're going to fetch the row as just a generic object, and then assert same for, and then we're casting it as an integer to the count, because I'm doing select count as the count. So now when I run this, I should get 1 test, 2 assertions, and everything works, and that'll tell me if I've set up my databases correct. So let's do PHPUnit, filter, copy, paste, test data ready. And it worked. So what that did just there is it truncated the database. It completely killed everything that was in IMC2. And that's really important for you to know, because since it's putting the database in a known state, it's killing all of your data. If I go back and look at this now, account notes is going to be empty because that's just the way that it was. And even if I go and restore from a backup, hold on while I do that. So I just restored from backup. If I hit select everything from account notes, well, there's nothing there. Let's do address, because I know there's a lot in address. So there's everything in addresses. I mean, there's 4,000 addresses there. If I then go run this, you will see in a moment that addresses is now blank. And it's only got the addresses that are available from the test. So make sure you've got proper backups, because after we're done doing this test, you would want to restore from the backup that we used to create this data set to start with, so that we can work with something else. It's always important to know that. But these 1 test, 2 assertions, what that means is we were able to create the data set, we were able to get the connection, and then when we counted it, our user count matched because we were expecting 4 user rows, which is ultimately what we did set up in our test and target data set. So here's our 4 user rows, and then when we executed the query, we got 5 zeros back, indicating that there was no error. So that's how we set up the data set, and we get it into a known state, and we get ready to work with it. Now, I did just happen to see one problem here, which is this user ID should be 4. So what we're going to do to fix that problem is a very, very simple restore. I'm going to put these, let's go to server, and I'm glad this happened this way because it gives me an opportunity to show this. So I'm going to do a restore into IMC2, and then I'm going to go get, and I'm going to bring this back, and we're going to do start import. And what this does is it puts it back in the state that we started that test with. So now if we jump back over to users, I can hit this, and you'll see that we've got these guys here. So I want to fix this because this should be users ID 4. Otherwise, it's going to cause a problem when I do my imports from the legacy users table, because it's expecting that to be 4. So I'm going to change that now. Oops. Let's change it. 4, and click apply. Apply. Finish. All we have to do here is rerun our smart dump, and there we go. So let's come back over here. We're going to rerun our test. There it is. We'll run it, and then after we're done, we'll come back over here, and we should see that that known good example is changed to a 4, and it is. So that's how you fix a problem after you created your test data set. You simply restore the SQL file that it creates when it creates your test data, put your database in the state that you need it to be in, and then run smart dump again, overwriting your previous ones. It's probably wise, however, to always keep backups of each one in each state. Once you overwrite it, then it's kind of gone, and that would be bad. So at any rate, that's how you do that, and now we can go ahead and start actually writing tests to do what we're supposed to do.